Greetings, everyone. My name is Dr. Jason Freeman. I'd like to welcome y'all to my channel. Now, with the Napoleon movie coming out in November this year, I want to talk about a person who, if they're not depicted in the movie, certainly should be. In this video, I'm going to talk about General Thomas-Alexandre Dumas and answer the question, is he the real Count of Monte Cristo? But before that, I have to answer the question, who is Thomas-Alexandre Dumas anyway? Thomas-Alexandre Dumas was born on the island of Saint-Domingue, which is present-day Haiti, on March 25th, 1762. His father was the Marquis Alexandre Antoine David de la Pailleterie, a French nobleman. His mother, Marie Cécile Dumas, was a slave of African descent. Earlier this year, I did a review of the film Chevalier about Joseph Boulogne, Chevalier de Saint-Georges, another mixed-race French aristocrat. Like Joseph Boulogne, Thomas-Alexandre's father brought him over to France to be educated as a French nobleman. In fact, the two men knew each other. At times, Thomas-Alexandre would be Joseph Boulogne's fencing partner. And during the French Revolution, Joseph Boulogne was Thomas-Alexandre's commanding officer in what came to be known as the Black Legion. The unit was also known as the American Legion because most of the men within the unit were of African descent from the French colonies in the Americas. Thomas-Alexandre got his first commission as an officer within the Black Legion and rose up the ranks quickly. In July 1793, he was promoted to the rank of Brigadier General of the North in the French Army. And in 1794, he was promoted to Commander-in-Chief of the French Army in the Alps. Thomas-Alexandre was later demoted and eventually became the leader of the cavalry during France's invasion of Egypt. But prior to that demotion, he actually outranked the eventual leader of the expedition, Napoleon Bonaparte. Now, getting back to the main question of this video, is General Thomas-Alexandre Dumas the real Count of Monte Cristo? I want to key in on one fact I've left out so far. General Thomas-Alexandre Dumas is the father of Alexandre Dumas, the author of the Three Musketeers, as well as the Count of Monte Cristo. So, is General Thomas-Alexandre Dumas the real Count of Monte Cristo? The short answer is yes, but it's complicated. The Count of Monte Cristo is actually a blend of several stories. First, in regards to the revenge plot, there was a real incident of a man who was falsely imprisoned based on the lies told by some of his friends. They said this man was disloyal to the French government and was actually spying for England, who was an enemy of France. The man was falsely imprisoned for those lies, but once the government switched over and a new regime came into power, he was eventually released. And once he was released, he went and systematically found all of his friends and murdered them. Now, in regards to Monte Cristo being chosen as a location for Edmond Dantes' imprisonment, that likely came from a promise that Alex Dumas made to Louis Bonaparte, who eventually would become Napoleon III. He promised Louis Bonaparte that he would include Monte Cristo in his next book, and that's basically what he did. However, in regards to the character of Edmond Dantes specifically, there are a lot of similarities between this character and Alex Dumas' father, Thomas-Alexandre Dumas. So after General Thomas-Alexandre Dumas served his time in Egypt, he fell ill, and so he decided to go back to France to be with his wife and daughter. On the way back, the ship that Thomas-Alexandre Dumas was on encountered a horrible storm that started to take on water, and so they were forced to dock in the Kingdom of Naples. Unfortunately, at the time, the Kingdom of Naples was hostile to France, and so General Thomas-Alexandre Dumas was captured and became a prisoner of war. And so later on, he recounts a lot of the suffering that he experienced within Toronto in the Kingdom of Naples. Toronto is the city that he was being held. And so a lot of that suffering was extremely similar to the suffering that was described in the Count of Monte Cristo. Both the real Thomas-Alexandre Dumas and Edmond Dantes were kept in a dungeon. They were essentially isolated from other prisoners, and it ended up being imprisoned under what they feel were false pretenses. Along with Dumas, a scientist named Dolomieu, he was actually also in prison. He was on the same ship. He's very similar to Abbe Faria, who was described in the Count of Monte Cristo. Again, both very learned men, both scientists, and both men died in prison. However, the most compelling evidence that Edmond Dantes and General Thomas-Alexandre Dumas are the same person comes from an 1843 novel titled Georges. Now, Georges is about a mixed-race French aristocrat, so someone of African and European white descent, who leads a group of black soldiers against an invading force of British soldiers into a French territory or French colony of Mauritius. Now, there are several elements in Georges that you see again in the Count of Monte Cristo, and particularly Georges goes back and essentially mixes among the people who were kind of his enemies, the French racist planters, but he passes as white. So essentially he deceives them, similar to the way that Count of Monte Cristo essentially finds the people who betrayed him, and they don't recognize him because he essentially looks very different than he did previously. And so General Thomas-Alexandre Dumas found his way into his son's work in the form of Georges. So Georges and Thomas-Alexandre Dumas are very similar, again, mixed race aristocrats who lead military units, including black soldiers. And so Georges eventually becomes Edmond Dantes in the Count of Monte Cristo. And so that's the connection. So from Thomas-Alexandre Dumas to Georges to Edmond Dantes. Now, of course, as I mentioned, there are other elements taken from other stories and other characters, but there's a clear line between Alex Dumas' father, Georges, and again, later, Edmond Dantes, who is the main character in the Count of Monte Cristo, making Thomas-Alexandre Dumas the real Count of Monte Cristo. If you found this video interesting and or informative, please like this video and subscribe to my channel. Also, please share this video. Also, if you want to learn more about the life of Thomas-Alexandre Dumas, please check out this book, The Black Count. You can find a link for the book, so you can Amazon link for the book in the content section below. Thank you all for your time and have a wonderful rest of your day.